Two brutal truths just came out of Westminster. Keir Starmer has rolled out the red carpet for a man sold to you as a democracy activist.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is in hot water after welcoming the arrival of a man who spent more than a decade as a political prisoner in Egypt. Alaa Abd el Fattah moved to the United Kingdom just last week after being pardoned by Egypt's president in September.
And at the very same time, the establishment that screams zero tolerance at ordinary Brits is suddenly relaxed about his own words on Western women and Jews. Stay with this, because once you see who Alaa Abd el Fattah really is, what Starmer actually did, and what he refused to say, you'll understand exactly who this government is scared of. And it isn't you. Let's start with the version you're meant to swallow. Alaa Abd el Fattah, prisoner of conscience, democracy activist, voice of the Arab Spring. He became famous during the uprisings in Egypt, blogging, organising, turning up at protests, becoming a symbol for Western media that wanted a clean, photogenic story of young digital activists versus old dictators. Over the years, he's been arrested, tried, jailed multiple times by different Egyptian governments: Mubarak, the military, Sisi. Human rights groups point to that record and say, look, he's a victim of authoritarianism. And on that narrow point, they've got a case. Egypt is not a free country. But here's what you're not supposed to look at. This same man has a long online trail of posts, shares and comments that, if written in Britain by the wrong kind of person, would end their career instantly. Comments about Western women that don't read like political theory. They read like predatory fantasies, degrading, sneering, reducing women to targets and punchlines. Rhetoric about the West that doesn't just attack governments, but paints whole societies as rotten, corrupted, deserving of humiliation. And language around Jews that critics say goes far beyond any debate about Israel, and straight into the old, familiar, dehumanising tropes that Jewish communities in Britain have heard for 100 years. His defenders rush out with the same script every time. Context, satire, rage at injustice. Fine. Let's say some of it was anger. Let's say some of it was badly judged jokes. Now be honest with yourself. If a white right-wing councillor in England had posted that kind of bile about Muslims, about Black Britons, about migrants, would Keir Starmer be on TV saying, look, we must understand the context? Or would Labour be demanding instant resignation, lifetime cancellation, and a public struggle session for anyone who'd ever stood next to them? We both know the answer. So when you strip away the PR, you're left with this. Yes, Abd el Fattah has been abused by an authoritarian regime. And yes, he's also a deeply radical, polarising figure whose own record is absolutely not clean. That's the man Keir Starmer chose to embrace. Now, what Starmer and Labour actually did. This wasn't a quiet letter. Behind the scenes, this was theatre. Labour MPs and staff started softening the ground. Interviews, social media posts, little human interest stories about his family, all pushing the line. Britain has a moral duty to stand by Alaa. Then Starmer moves. He doesn't just nod politely, he steps in as the statesman. Statements, photo ops. Language carefully designed to frame Alaa as a symbol of rights, freedom, democracy. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's telling NGOs, activists, and a certain media class, I'm your man, I get it, I'm one of you. At any point, he could have added one sentence. By the way, we completely reject and condemn his past rhetoric about Western women and Jews. Human rights are universal, and that includes our own citizens. Did he? No. No caveats, no hard line. No respect for the fact that British women and British Jews might not want to be told they now have to stand in. Solidarity with someone who has spoken about them like that. Instead, Labour treated him as a clean moral asset. Full stop. And that tells you something very simple. The so-called zero tolerance this party loves to brag about is strictly selective. If you're a Labour activist who shares the right hashtags, endless nuance, infinite context. If you're an ordinary Brit who said the wrong thing on Facebook 10 years ago, ruined. Once this blew up, you could see the split straight away. Inside the bubble, Westminster, NGO world, parts of the press, the reaction was basically pre-written. Columns praising Starmer's moral leadership, talking heads saying Britain must stand with Alaa. A lot of emotional language about courage, principle, solidarity, almost no real engagement with what he's actually said about Westerners, about women, about Jews. If you raised that, you were accused of bad, faith, of weaponising his words, of being part of some dark agenda. Then there's everyone else. Jewish communities who've already been through the Corbyn years, told over and over again that Labour had changed. They look at this and think, right, so anti-Semitism is unforgivable. Unless it's politically fashionable anti-Semitism, wrapped in the right kind of activism. British women who hear constant speeches from Labour about misogyny, safety, believe women. They see this man's past comments. They hear the silence from the same people who would explode if those words came from a Reform councillor in Kent, and they draw their own conclusions. Ordinary voters who don't live on Twitter but recognise hypocrisy when they see it. They see the pattern. If you're on the approved side, your hate is complex. Your victims are told to understand the context. If you're on the unapproved side, you're done for far less. Some on the right, including Reform voices and Conservative commentators, came out blasting Starmer's judgment. Others, not even hard right, just normal centrists, said what a lot of people were thinking. You can oppose authoritarian regimes without whitewashing the extremists who oppose them. You can support human rights without handing out moral sainthood to people who hold your own citizens in contempt. And the question that hangs over all of this is simple. Who is Starmer actually afraid of upsetting? You, or the NGO media class who decide who Europe's heroes are this week? Put the pieces together. Keir Starmer wants you to believe he's the sensible adult in the room. Tough on anti-Semitism, champion of women's rights, defender of British values. But when push comes to shove, and he has to choose between protecting those values at home or earning applause from a small international activist crowd abroad, he picked the applause. He was happy to align himself with a man whose record, if attached to a British Tory backbencher, would have him demanding instant resignation on every channel in the country. That isn't principle, it's opportunism dressed up as morality. So here's the question for you. After this, how seriously can you take Labour's grand speeches about anti-Semitism, about women's safety, about zero tolerance for hate? Is there one rule for you and another for people who fit their favourite narrative? Tell me in the comments. Does Starmer's embrace of Alaa Abd el Fattah change how you see this government? Where is your red line? What's the moment you say, no, I'm not swallowing this, enough? If you're tired of being lectured by people who live by double standards, make sure you're subscribed to British Bulletin, because we're going to keep pulling these stories apart. Calmly, clearly, and without asking permission from Westminster. They have the spin, you still have the truth.